My daughter left me crawling on the cold tile floor, choosing a six-figure consultation over her mother's dignity. That betrayal was the catalyst. The antiseptic scent of the post-operative recovery unit clung to me, a constant sharp reminder of the titanium implanted in my knee. I was 68 years old, a career nurse who had spent 40 years ensuring the comfort of others, yet I was utterly dependent on my daughter, Cecilia Thorne, and her husband, Julian. I had paid for this surgery, just as I had paid for so many things in their lives: Cecilia's tuition at Johns Hopkins, the down payment on their sprawling New England home, and countless unexpected financial gaps over the past 15 years. I believed this reliance would foster love and reciprocal care. I was dangerously, catastrophically wrong. The agony was a dull, throbbing drumbeat centered in my right knee, but the true pain was the chilling realization that struck me 3 days after I arrived at their immaculate, impersonal home for recovery. Cecilia, a brilliant anesthesiologist, and Julian, a respected cardiothoracic surgeon, had both dismissed my need for assistance with a shocking synchronized indifference. I need help to the commode, honey," I called out, my voice weak, my throat dry from the oxycodone and the fear. The pain was peaking, making any movement a torturous effort. The physical therapist, whom I had insisted they hire and pay for, was only scheduled for the late afternoon, from the hallway. I heard the faint clink of expensive glassware and Julian's smooth, professional voice on a conference call. "Yes, Dr. Reynolds, the proposal is solid. We're looking at a 15% profit margin on that model." I waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity. My bladder screamed. The pain medication made my head swim, yet it was not strong enough to dull the acute physical need. I called again, louder this time, tinged with urgency. "Please, Cecilia. I can't hold it." The door to the study opened, not fully, but enough for Cecilia's head to poke out. Her face, usually so composed and elegant, was tightened into a mask of pure exasperation. She didn't approach the bedside. She just stood there, framed by the dark oak molding and the shadow of her husband continuing his vital call in the background. "Mom, can't you wait? We are both on calls right now. This is a massive contract, and you know how busy we are. Just use the bedpan. The bedpan is too painful right now. I just need a couple of minutes to stand up and walk the 10 feet. Please just hold my arm. I can do the rest." Cecilia sighed, a sound of such monumental martyrdom that it felt like a physical blow. "Mom, I am a doctor, not a nurse's aide. And I certainly am not your nurse's aide. You hired that physical therapist for a reason. Julian and I have demanding careers. This is exactly what I mean about your expectations being unrealistic. Can't you see this is an imposition?" She closed the door. The quiet click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The insult was not the refusal. The insult was the justification. The refusal to offer 2 minutes of physical support, the refusal to grant 1 second of compassion, was rooted in the dismissive arrogance that their time, their careers, their professional status, superseded a mother's basic human need. I was paralyzed by a cocktail of physical agony and emotional shock. The urge to move became uncontrollable. Gritting my teeth, I pushed the heavy comforter aside. My knees screamed a language of torn tissue and bruised bone. I tried to use the bedside table to pull myself up, but my grip slipped. I pitched forward, the shock of the fall momentarily eclipsing the pain. I landed heavily on the Persian rug, the cool wool pressing against my cheek. I lay there, winded, trying to regulate my breathing. The muffled sound of Julian's successful contract negotiation drifted under the door. "So we can solidify this deal by next Thursday." I was on the floor. I was in agony, and they were choosing to close a business deal rather than open the door for a mother who had made every sacrifice imaginable for their success. It was in that moment, lying helpless on the floor of the house my money had secured, that the clouds of my enabling love finally lifted. I saw the true face of their entitlement, a face devoid of gratitude, warped by the belief that my resources were merely an extension of their lifestyle, and that I, Eleanor Vance, was now just an inconvenient obstacle to be managed. I crawled. It was a humiliating, agonizing journey of 10 feet across the plush carpet to the adjoining bathroom. With a superhuman effort fueled by pure, white-hot indignation, I pulled myself up onto the toilet. I sat there, not just relieving myself but weeping silently, the tears blurring the gold-plated fixtures I had helped choose 5 years prior. The tears were not for the pain in my knee, but for the 40 years I had poured into a relationship that was revealed, in this critical moment, to be a transactional facade. I knew, with absolute terrifying certainty, that I had to leave. I had to sever the cord of codependency I had been funding for decades. I was not leaving them to punish them. I was leaving them to save myself. I would not allow myself to die on their cold, expensive floor. I would rewrite my final chapter beginning right now. The first step was finding my phone, which lay just out of reach on the nightstand 15 inches away. I reaching not just for the device but for my future. I would call Audrey. I would call Marcus King, my lawyer. The transactional ledger was closing. My rebirth was about to begin. The sheer effort to reach that phone consumed my last reserves of strength. But as my fingers closed around the plastic casing, I felt the first surge of control I had experienced since the day I entered the operating room. I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of my own liberation. The phone felt heavy and monumental in my hand, a weapon forged in the crucible of my humiliation. My knee throbbed relentlessly, but the clarity of my purpose was a potent analgesic. I bypassed Cecilia and Julian's numbers. They were the disease. Audrey Hayes was the cure. Audrey, I whispered when she answered on the second ring, my voice thick with unshed tears. I need you. I need you now. There was no pause, no unnecessary question. That was why Audrey, my best friend of over 30 years, was my only true family. I'm on my way, Eleanor. Don't move. Don't speak to them. Just put the phone down, and I'll be there in under 30 minutes. I managed to drag myself back to the bed, propped up against the pillows, pretending to be asleep when Cecilia finally peered in. 20 minutes later, after her husband's call had ended. Oh, you're back in bed, Cecilia stated flatly, not apologetically. Good. I was just about to come check on you. I really couldn't interrupt Julian's call, Mom. It was a huge win for the practice. I'll get you a glass of water. She was still framing her neglect as a necessity born of professional triumph. I kept my eyes closed, the silence speaking volumes. I was done with her narrative. When Audrey arrived, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Audrey didn't knock. She entered with the authority of someone who knew the house better than its current occupants. She found me waiting, fully dressed in the sweatsuit I'd laid out with difficulty, clutching my purse. Cecilia, Julian, Audrey's voice was low and dangerous. I'm taking Eleanor to my place. She needs an environment conducive to healing. What? Cecilia stepped into the room, her composure immediately threatened. Why, we just got her settled. She can't travel. She can't stay, Audrey countered, helping me carefully slide off the mattress. She's not receiving the care she requires, and her emotional state is compromised. I'm her power of attorney for health care until the new documents are finalized, and I am making the decision. I'll take full responsibility for her care. This was a magnificent lie. Cecilia still held the healthcare proxy, but the sheer audacity of Audrey's claim, delivered with such steely confidence, momentarily froze Cecilia. This is ridiculous, Audrey. This is manipulation! Julian and I are doctors. And I, Audrey said, supporting my full weight as I struggled with the cane, am a friend who witnessed what happened 3 days ago. Her eyes cut to the still rumpled Persian rug. We are leaving. Don't follow us. You'll hear from Marcus King by the end of the day. The drive to Audrey's cozier, sunnier apartment felt like escaping from a gilded cage. Once settled on her plush sofa, the immediate urgency subsided, replaced by a suffocating grief. It was later that evening, as the news of the frozen accounts and the lawyer's letter began to ripple outward, that the collateral damage hit. My phone rang with an unknown number. It was Lucas, my 19-year-old grandson, calling from his campus in California. My daughter left me crawling on the cold tile floor, choosing a 6-figure consultation over her mother's dignity. That betrayal was the catalyst. The antiseptic scent of the post-operative recovery unit clung to me, a constant sharp reminder of the titanium implanted in my knee. I was 68 years old, a career nurse who had spent 40 years ensuring the comfort of others, yet I was utterly dependent on my daughter, Cecilia Thorne, and her husband, Julian. I had paid for this surgery, just as I had paid for so many things in their lives: Cecilia's tuition at Johns Hopkins, the down payment on their sprawling New England home, and countless unexpected financial gaps over the past 15 years. I believed this reliance would foster love and reciprocal care. I was dangerously, catastrophically wrong. The agony was a dull, throbbing drumbeat centered in my right knee, but the true pain was the chilling realization that struck me 3 days after I arrived at their immaculate, impersonal home for recovery. Cecilia, a brilliant anesthesiologist, and Julian, a respected cardiothoracic surgeon, had both dismissed my need for assistance with a shocking synchronized indifference. I need help to the commode, honey," I called out, my voice weak, my throat dry from the oxycodone and the fear. The pain was peaking, making any movement a torturous effort. The physical therapist, whom I had insisted they hire and pay for, was only scheduled for the late afternoon. From the hallway, I heard the faint clink of expensive glassware and Julian's smooth, professional voice on a conference call. "Yes, Dr. Reynolds, the proposal is solid. We're looking at a 15% profit margin on that model." I waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity. My bladder screamed. The pain medication made my head swim, yet it was not strong enough to dull the acute physical need. I called again, louder this time, tinged with urgency. "Please, Cecilia. I can't hold it." The door to the study opened, not fully, but enough for Cecilia's head to poke out. Her face, usually so composed and elegant, was tightened into a mask of pure exasperation. She didn't approach the bedside. She just stood there, framed by the dark oak molding and the shadow of her husband continuing his vital call in the background. "Mom, can't you wait? We are both on calls right now. This is a massive contract, and you know how busy we are. Just use the bedpan. The bedpan is too painful right now. I just need a couple of minutes to stand up and walk the 10 feet. Please just hold my arm. I can do the rest." Cecilia sighed, a sound of such monumental martyrdom that it felt like a physical blow. "Mom, I am a doctor, not a nurse's aide. And I certainly am not your nurse's aide. You hired that physical therapist for a reason. Julian and I have demanding careers. This is exactly what I mean about your expectations being unrealistic. Can't you see this is an imposition?" She closed the door. The quiet click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The insult was not the refusal. The insult was the justification. The refusal to offer 2 minutes of physical support, the refusal to grant 1 second of compassion, was rooted in the dismissive arrogance that their time, their careers, their professional status, superseded a mother's basic human need. I was paralyzed by a cocktail of physical agony and emotional shock. The urge to move became uncontrollable. Gritting my teeth, I pushed the heavy comforter aside. My knee screamed a language of torn tissue and bruised bone. I tried to use the bedside table to pull myself up, but my grip slipped. I pitched forward, the shock of the fall momentarily eclipsing the pain. I landed heavily on the Persian rug, the cool wool pressing against my cheek. I lay there, winded, trying to regulate my breathing. The muffled sound of Julian's successful contract negotiation drifted under the door. "So we can solidify this deal by next Thursday." I was on the floor. I was in agony, and they were choosing to close a business deal rather than open the door for a mother who had made every sacrifice imaginable for their success. It was in that moment, lying helpless on the floor of the house my money had secured, that the clouds of my enabling love finally lifted. I saw the true face of their entitlement, a face devoid of gratitude, warped by the belief that my resources were merely an extension of their lifestyle, and that I, Eleanor Vance, was now just an inconvenient obstacle to be managed. I crawled. It was a humiliating, agonizing journey of 10 feet across the plush carpet to the adjoining bathroom. With a superhuman effort fueled by pure, white-hot indignation, I pulled myself up onto the toilet. I sat there, not just relieving myself but weeping silently. the tears blurring the gold-plated fixtures I had helped choose 5 years prior. The tears were not for the pain in my knee, but for the 40 years I had poured into a relationship that was revealed, in this critical moment, to be a transactional facade. I knew, with absolute terrifying certainty, that I had to leave. I had to sever the cord of codependency I had been funding for decades. I was not leaving them to punish them. I was leaving them to save myself. I would not allow myself to die on their cold, expensive floor. I would rewrite my final chapter beginning right now. The first step was finding my phone, which lay just out of reach on the nightstand 15 inches away. I reaching not just for the device but for my future. I would call Audrey. I would call Marcus King, my lawyer. The transactional ledger was closing. My rebirth was about to begin. The sheer effort to reach that phone consumed my last reserves of strength. But as my fingers closed around the plastic casing, I felt the first surge of control I had experienced since the day I entered the operating room. I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of my own liberation. The phone felt heavy and monumental in my hand, a weapon forged in the crucible of my humiliation. My knee throbbed relentlessly, but the clarity of my purpose was a potent analgesic. I bypassed Cecilia and Julian's numbers. They were the disease. Audrey Hayes was the cure. Audrey, I whispered when she answered on the second ring, my voice thick with unshed tears. I need you. I need you now. There was no pause, no unnecessary question. That was why Audrey, my best friend of over 30 years, was my only true family. I'm on my way, Eleanor. Don't move. Don't speak to them. Just put the phone down, and I'll be there in under 30 minutes. I managed to drag myself back to the bed, propped up against the pillows, pretending to be asleep when Cecilia finally peered in. 20 minutes later, after her husband's call had ended. Oh, you're back in bed, Cecilia stated flatly, not apologetically. Good. I was just about to come check on you. I really couldn't interrupt Julian's call, Mom. It was a huge win for the practice. I'll get you a glass of water. She was still framing her neglect as a necessity born of professional triumph. I kept my eyes closed, the silence speaking volumes. I was done with her narrative. When Audrey arrived, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Audrey didn't knock. She entered with the authority of someone who knew the house better than its current occupants. She found me waiting, fully dressed in the sweatsuit I'd laid out with difficulty, clutching my purse. Cecilia, Julian, Audrey's voice was low and dangerous. I'm taking Eleanor to my place. She needs an environment conducive to healing. What? Cecilia stepped into the room, her composure immediately threatened. Why, we just got her settled. She can't travel. She can't stay, Audrey countered, helping me carefully slide off the mattress. She's not receiving the care she requires, and her emotional state is compromised. I'm her power of attorney for health care until the new documents are finalized, and I am making the decision. I'll take full responsibility for her care. This was a magnificent lie. Cecilia still held the healthcare proxy, but the sheer audacity of Audrey's claim, delivered with such steely confidence, momentarily froze Cecilia. This is ridiculous, Audrey. This is manipulation! Julian and I are doctors. And I, Audrey said, supporting my full weight as I struggled with the cane, am a friend who witnessed what happened 3 days ago. Her eyes cut to the still rumpled Persian rug. We are leaving. Don't follow us. You'll hear from Marcus King by the end of the day. The drive to Audrey's cozier, sunnier apartment felt like escaping from a gilded cage. Once settled on her plush sofa, the immediate urgency subsided, replaced by a suffocating grief. It was later that evening, as the news of the frozen accounts and the lawyer's letter began to ripple outward, that the collateral damage hit. My phone rang with an unknown number. It was Lucas, my 19-year-old grandson, calling from his campus in California. I know what you did. Changing your will won't fix what's broken between us. Call me when you're ready to have a real conversation instead of hiding behind lawyers. My hand trembled slightly as I showed Audrey the message. How did she find out so quickly? I wondered aloud, the old fear of her influence momentarily resurfacing. Small communities talk, Daniel Reed offered unexpectedly as he helped stretch my leg. His voice was calm and professional. I've worked with enough wealthy families to know that banks, law offices, and medical facilities all have staff who gossip. No offense intended. None taken, I assured him. You're probably right. After Daniel left, I found myself staring at Cecilia's message, trying to decode what lay beneath her words. Was there a genuine desire to repair our relationship, or just another desperate attempt to regain access to my resources? The question tired me. You don't have to decide anything right now, Audrey reminded me, sensing my distress. I know, I sighed. But eventually I'll have to face her. On your terms, Audrey emphasized. When you're stronger, both physically and emotionally. Over the next 3 days, I committed myself entirely to my physical recovery. Daniel was relentless, pushing me through stretches and weight-bearing exercises with a kind but unyielding firmness. The pain was still constant, but it was now a purposeful pain, the kind that signals rebuilding, not decay. Each degree of increased flexibility felt like a minute victory against the helplessness I had experienced on Cecilia's floor. I also focused on the emotional rehabilitation. I called Marcus King to discuss the next steps, securing a restraining order against Julian from accessing my property, which included the home, and sending a final formal eviction notice. I learned through my lawyer that Julian had initially tried to resist the frozen accounts, claiming my action was erratic and demanding the bank release the funds he felt he was entitled to. The bank, seeing the revocation of power of attorney, refused. The legal system, for the first time, was protecting me from my own family. On the 4th day, I received a call from Isabel Diaz, the current rehabilitation unit manager at Golden Pines and the former student to whom I was leaving my mother's pearls. She called to confirm the upcoming discharge date I had tentatively set. And, "Eleanor," Isabel said, her voice dropping slightly, "I have to mention your daughter, Cecilia, has been calling the unit. She's asked about your progress, your expected discharge date, and specifically, whether you're receiving visitors and if she could be added to an approved list." "And what did you tell her?" I asked, my heart rate spiking slightly. "Nothing without your express permission," Isabel assured me immediately. "Patient confidentiality applies, even with family members. But she is persistent. She even pulled the 'I'm a doctor here' card." I paused, thinking. This was my first true test of boundaries with a third party. I needed to send a clear, unequivocal message. If she calls again, "Isabel, please tell her this, word for word. Mrs. Vance is progressing well and will contact Dr. Thorne directly when she is ready for a conversation. All matters regarding her care and estate are currently handled by her legal representative, Marcus King." "Understood," Isabel replied, a hint of admiration in her tone. "I'll make sure the message is logged and disseminated to the front desk staff." As I hung up, I realized the subtle power of my new stance. I was no longer an emotional hostage. I was a client, a patient, and a principal. I was using the very systems I had taught Cecilia to respect, the law, professional boundaries, and patient privacy, to protect myself from her. This denial of access, though simple, felt more powerful than any confrontation. I had taken the first step onto the path of true, unyielding self-respect. That evening, the quiet, protective atmosphere of Audrey's apartment was shattered by a jarring ring of the doorbell around 7 o'clock. Audrey peered through the peephole, her posture immediately stiffening. "It's Julian," she whispered. My heart raced, a drum in my chest competing with the relentless throb in my knee. "I don't want to see him," I murmured, sinking deeper into the sofa. "I'll handle it," Audrey assured me. She opened the door just enough to block entry while keeping the security chain engaged, transforming herself instantly from a warm friend into a formidable security guard. From my position in the living room, I could hear their conversation clearly, every word a shard of cold glass. "I need to speak with Eleanor." Julian's voice was tightly controlled. The smooth baritone usually reserved for informing families of surgical success now laced with raw desperation. "She's not receiving visitors," Audrey replied firmly, her voice entirely devoid of warmth. "This is between family," he insisted, the word family sounding hollow. "You have no right to interfere." "I have every right to decide who enters my home," Audrey countered, leaning slightly into the door frame. "Eleanor has made it clear she doesn't wish to speak with you." The professional veneer cracked. "Audrey, just tell her we're staying at the Marriott downtown. Our credit cards are being declined. We can't access any accounts. Does she understand what she's doing to us?" His voice dropped, almost pleading now. "I believe she understands perfectly," Audrey replied, her tone chillingly cold. "Cecilia's a mess," he continued, abandoning all pretense of a social call. Is that what she wanted? To destroy her own daughter? Something in his words struck me as fundamentally wrong. The assumption that my actions were designed to hurt rather than to protect myself. It was the ultimate display of narcissistic projection. Before Audrey could respond, I called out, finding a surprising reserves of strength in my voice. "It's all right, Audrey. Let me answer him." Audrey looked concerned, but respected my autonomy, stepping aside just enough to allow me to approach the door, still keeping the security chain connected. Using my walker, I made my way slowly to the threshold. Julian's appearance shocked me. Just 5 days had passed since I'd left their house, but he looked disheveled, his usually immaculate appearance, the crisp suit, the perfectly slicked back hair, now rumpled and tired. His eyes were bloodshot. "Eleanor," he began, his tone instantly shifting to a conciliatory, paternalistic whine. "This has all gotten out of hand. We need to talk." "No, Julian," I interrupted quietly, my voice low but carrying the authority of a former unit manager during a crisis. "What we need is space and time. What you and Cecilia need is to experience the consequences of your actions and attitudes." His facade of politeness cracked completely. "So this is punishment?" "This is reality," I corrected him. "The reality that 2 adults with advanced medical degrees and combined 6-figure salaries should be able to support themselves without draining their elderly mothers' accounts. You've always been so generous before," he argued, his voice rising in outrage. "How are we supposed to know you'd suddenly change the rules? This is unfair." The sheer entitlement in his question left me momentarily speechless. He truly believed he was the victim of a sudden, unpredictable change in policy. My policy of unconditional, unquestioning financial support. Then, with perfect clarity, I replied, "Perhaps when you told me you weren't my nurses, you should have remembered that I was never your banker." I closed the door then, not waiting for his response. I slid the deadbolt shut, the heavy thunk echoing the finality of my decision. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from a surge of raw, powerful autonomy I'd forgotten I possessed. "Grandma, what's going on?" His voice was strained, clearly repeating a script. "Dad says you're manipulating everyone with your money, that you've always used it to control him and Mom." The accusation, delivered through the mouth of the one person I had never intended to harm, was devastating. I closed my eyes, trying to gather the necessary composure. "Your mother and I have very different perspectives on our history, sweetheart," I finally said, the fatigue overwhelming me. "But I want you to know that whatever happens between us, it doesn't change how I feel about you. I paid for your summer program because I believed in your talent and wanted to support your dreams. There were no strings attached, ever." "I don't know what to believe," he admitted honestly. "They say we might have to move and Mom's been crying and everything's just messed up." "I am so sorry you are caught in the middle of this, Lucas," I told him sincerely. "It's not fair to you." After we hung up, I sat quietly contemplating the ripple effects. Standing up for myself wasn't affecting only Cecilia and Julian. It was reshaping every relationship connected to them. "Collateral damage," Audrey observed, reading my expression. "It's unavoidable. He's just a boy." "He's 19, she reminded me, her voice firm. "Old enough to form his own opinions eventually, once the dust settles." As night fell, I found myself standing before the mirror in Audrey's guest bathroom, really looking at my reflection for the first time in years. The woman staring back at me seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign. The same gray-streaked hair and laugh lines, but with a new nascent steadiness in her gaze. I thought about the allies who had emerged in just the past 48 hours. Audrey, Marcus King, and the sheer number of former colleagues who respected me enough to question the narrative Cecilia was spinning. For decades, I had poured all my emotional energy into one relationship, neglecting the community that had quietly surrounded me all along. Enough, I whispered to my reflection. It's time to rewrite this story. The following morning, Marcus King arrived with a notary and a formidable stack of documents that would fundamentally reshape my future. Marcus was a sharp, meticulous man in his late 50s, whom I had trusted with my estate planning for 2 decades. As we spread the papers across Audrey's dining table, a warm, mahogany surface that felt more like a fortress than the Thorns' cold marble, I felt a strange mix of profound grief and intoxicating liberation. The grief was for the daughter I was admitting I had lost. The liberation was for the woman I was finally allowing to emerge. We'll start with the revocation of power of attorney, Marcus explained, sliding the first, neatly typed document toward me. This nullifies any previous authorization Cecilia had to act on your behalf, financially and legally. I picked up the pen, my hand hovering over the signature line. Will this be public record? Yes, Marcus confirmed, his gaze steady. That's partly the point, to create an official paper trail showing you've explicitly removed her authority and that you are of sound mind and body in doing so. I signed my name, Eleanor Vance, with a surprisingly steady hand. The sheer act felt like severing an umbilical cord that had been toxic for years. Next came the healthcare proxy. This was the document that would determine who could make medical decisions for me if I became incapacitated. For over 20 years, Cecilia's name had occupied that space, a testament to my faith in her as a daughter and a physician. That faith was now annihilated. Have you decided who you'd like to name? Marcus asked gently. I glanced at Audrey, who had been quietly but firmly supportive throughout this process, bringing us fresh coffee and maintaining a quiet vigil. Would you be willing, Audrey? Her eyes widened slightly in genuine surprise, quickly followed by a profound tenderness. Of course, Eleanor. I'd be honored. But are you certain? More certain than I've been about anything in years, I replied, signing her name into the document. I trust you with my life. Literally in this case. As I signed that document, I felt a massive weight lift. No longer would I have to fear that a future health crisis might give Cecilia leverage or control over my fate. The most difficult document came last, my revised will. My original will, drafted in the wake of my late husband's death 25 years ago, had simply designated everything to Cecilia, and then to Lucas. You don't have to make final decisions today, Marcus reminded me. This is just a preliminary revision to ensure Cecilia and Julian don't remain your primary beneficiaries, securing your wishes temporarily. I stared at the blank spaces where new names should go. I've never considered anyone else. Take your time, Marcus advised, leaning back. Many of my clients establish charitable foundations or trusts with specific purposes. Others choose to benefit institutions that were meaningful to them, creating a lasting legacy. As he spoke, an idea began forming, something that felt so intrinsically right in a way that my previous obligatory distribution never had. Boston Memorial, I said slowly, naming the hospital where I had worked most of my life. They have an excellent nursing scholarship program. For years, I've watched talented nurse aides struggle to advance their education while working full-time, often having to juggle 2 or even 3 jobs. Marcus nodded, making rapid, elegant notes. A scholarship endowment would be entirely feasible with your assets. A wonderful tribute to your career? And Lucas, I added, my voice softening slightly. My grandson shouldn't suffer for his parents' actions. I'd like to establish a trust for him, something Cecilia and Julian can't access, but that will support his education and perhaps help him purchase his first home someday, when he turns 30. Very reasonable. Marcus agreed, checking off the item. Anything else? I thought about my modest collection of antique jewelry, including my mother's pearls, a single, elegant strand I'd always assumed would go to Cecilia someday. I thought of Isabel Diaz, the rehabilitation unit manager at Golden Pines, whom I'd mentored decades ago. Isabel had a niece who was about to enter nursing school and was struggling to afford the deposit. Yes, I decided. Isabel Diaz's niece. I'd like to leave my mother's pearls to her. It's a symbolic passing of the torch. As we continued working through the details, I realized I was dismantling the future I had always imagined, one where my possessions and resources would naturally flow to my daughter and her family. In its place, I was creating something new, a legacy that reflected my values, my vocation, and my trust, rather than my obligation. By the time Marcus and the notary left, I felt emotionally drained, but oddly peaceful. The papers were signed, the decisions made. There would be no going back to the way things had been. "How do you feel?" Audrey asked, bringing me a cup of peppermint tea. "Like I've attended my own funeral," I admitted. "But also like you've been reborn," she finished thoughtfully. "Endings and beginnings often happen simultaneously." That afternoon, Daniel Reed, my physical therapist, arrived for our first home session, a kind, dedicated man 20 years my junior, whom Audrey had arranged to see me privately rather than at the facility. As Daniel guided me through exercises that made sweat bead on my forehead, my phone rang. Cecilia's number flashed on the screen. "Do you want to answer it?" Audrey asked. I shook my head firmly. "Not right now." The exhaustion from the legal morning was still a heavy blanket. The phone eventually stopped ringing, only to light up moments later with a text message. "I've restructured my estate," I confirmed, taking a steadying breath. "Some of my assets will go to nursing scholarships, some to charitable causes I believe in, and some," I looked directly at him, "will be held in trust for you, accessible when you're a bit older." His eyes widened. "For me?" But Mom said, "Lucas, inheritance isn't a right," I interrupted gently. "It's a gift, and gifts should go to people who have shown love, respect, and appreciation, not entitlement." 2 weeks after Lucas's visit, I made the calculated decision to move into Golden Pines Rehabilitation Center. The irony was not lost on me. This was the very facility Cecilia had threatened to have me committed to in her moment of fury. I was now choosing it on my own terms. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" Audrey asked as she helped me pack my few belongings. "You're welcome to stay with me until you're fully recovered." "I'm sure," I replied, carefully folding a sweater. "You've been incredible, Audrey, but I need to start rebuilding my independence. And I need a neutral battlefield." The truth was more complex. Yes, I needed to regain my physical strength, but I also needed emotional space. Room to process the seismic shifts in my life without feeling like a burden to anyone else. Golden Pines was where I'd sent countless patients over the years, confident they would receive excellent care. Isabel Diaz, the unit manager whom I had contacted personally, had arranged for me to have a private, spacious room overlooking the center's tranquil gardens. Many of the staff were former colleagues or students who greeted me with genuine warmth rather than professional detachment. "Nurse Vance," exclaimed Margot, a certified nursing assistant whom I had supervised years ago. "We've got you in our best room, though it feels strange to have you as a patient rather than giving us orders." "Please, it's just Eleanor now," I reminded her with a smile, "and I promise to be a model patient." My days quickly fell into a structured, purposeful rhythm. Physical therapy in the mornings, occupational therapy in the afternoons, and quiet evenings reading or talking with other residents. The work was painful but rewarding, each day bringing measurable progress in my knees' flexibility and strength. What I hadn't anticipated was how the center would become a gathering place for my newfound support system. Audrey visited daily, often bringing treats or books. Former colleagues stopped by during their breaks. "You've made quite the impression on people over the years, Eleanor," Audrey observed one afternoon. "I've never seen someone in rehab with such a steady stream of visitors." "I never realized," I admitted. "When you're working, you don't think about the connections you're building. You're just doing your job." "No," Audrey shook her head firmly. "You were never just doing your job, Eleanor. You were investing in people, and now they're returning that investment. A week into my stay, Daniel Reed, my physical therapist, brought unexpected news during our session in the gym. Your daughter's been calling the center again, he mentioned casually as he helped me navigate the parallel bars, pushing a new boundary of weight distribution. She's been asking about your expected discharge date and demanding to know your progress. My steps faltered slightly. What have you told her? What you instructed, he assured me. That you'll contact her when ready. But she's getting more aggressive. She showed up at the front desk yesterday, demanding to see your care plan and asserting her right as next of kin to assess your care situation. She threatened to call the hospital administration. She's trying to manufacture a crisis, I stated flatly. The old me would have panicked. The new me analyzed. What happened? Ibel Diaz handled it, Daniel said, his eyes conveying respect. She cited patient privacy protocols and reminded Cecilia of her professional obligations. Isabel was magnificent, but she wanted me to warn you. Later that evening, the manufactured crisis came to a head. A soft, apologetic knock on my door announced Margot, the nursing assistant. I'm so sorry to bother you, Eleanor, but there's someone insisting on seeing you. She says she's your daughter. My heart raced, but my mind was utterly clear. Is it Cecilia? Margot nodded, looking nervous. At the front desk. She's claiming it's her right as a doctor to assess your care. Isabel is handling it, but Cecilia is raising her voice. The old me would have acquiesced immediately, avoiding conflict at all costs. But I was no longer that woman. Please tell her that I am not accepting visitors this evening, I said firmly, my voice steady, and remind her that as a medical professional, she should respect patient privacy and facility protocols. If she continues to be disruptive, Margot, please alert security immediately. She is not welcome here. Margot looked relieved. I'll tell her, Eleanor. After she left, I sat with the knowledge that for the first time in our adult relationship, I had used institutional power to deny Cecilia access to me. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Minutes later, my phone rang. Cecilia's number flashed on the screen. This time, I answered. Hello, Cecilia. They won't let me see you. Her voice was tight with controlled anger, bordering on hysteria. What have you told them about me? I'm your daughter. Only that I am not accepting visitors this evening, I replied, perfectly calm. It's been a tiring day. I'm not just any visitor. I'm your daughter, your only child. The emphasis on only was pointed, a reminder of the unique, non-negotiable position she believed she held. Yes, you are, I acknowledged, my voice neither rising nor falling. And when I'm ready to see you, I'll let you know. Not a moment sooner. Ready? She scoffed. What does that even mean? We need to talk about what you've done. The accounts, the house, the will. You can't just cut me out of your life over one bad day. It wasn't one bad day, Cecilia, I said quietly, firmly. It was the culmination of years of imbalance in our relationship. We will talk eventually, but not tonight. And not until I am stronger. Tyler said you've been manipulating him too, she accused, venom returning to her voice, telling him you've set up some trust fund for him while cutting me out. I didn't manipulate anyone, I stated. I simply answered his questions honestly. He deserves the truth. You know what? Fine. Her voice hardened into polished steel. Stay in that place with all your nurse friends fawning over you. Play the victim. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize how lonely life is without family. Is that what you think this is about? I asked genuinely, curiously. That I want you to crawl back? Isn't it? Isn't this whole dramatic production designed to make us grovel for forgiveness? I sighed deeply, recognizing the depth of her misunderstanding. No, Cecilia. This isn't about punishment or groveling. It's about recognizing my own worth and setting healthy boundaries, something I should have done decades ago. Boundaries, she repeated mockingly. Is that what your therapist is calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like plain old revenge. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said, refusing to be baited into anger. When you're ready to have a real conversation, one that acknowledges how your actions affected me, I'll be here. Until then, I need space to heal. Whatever. Mom, call me when you're done with your little empowerment journey. The line went dead. I placed my phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking slightly but my mind clearer than ever. Despite her dismissive words, I'd heard something beneath Cecilia's anger. Fear. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she was facing a mother who wouldn't capitulate to emotional manipulation. I had passed an important test. 1 week after Cecilia's dramatic visit to Golden Pines, the legal confrontation escalated from eviction notices to a full-scale battle for my autonomy. Marcus King called me into his downtown office for an urgent meeting. "Eleanor," he began, placing a thick file on the table labeled Vance vs. Thorne. "They've filed. Cecilia and Julian have petitioned the court for an emergency hearing to establish a temporary guardianship, claiming you are suffering from acute, impaired decision-making capacity following your surgery." I felt a cold wave of shock wash over me, quickly replaced by a sharp, invigorating burst of anger. This was the ultimate betrayal, the weaponization of their medical knowledge against their own mother. On what grounds? I demanded, my voice tight. My cognitive function is perfect. Daniel Reed can attest to my stability. Audrey can. Their petition is clever and frankly vicious, Marcus admitted, looking genuinely frustrated. They are arguing that a 68-year-old woman, recently undergoing major orthopedic surgery, who was found using a high dosage of opioid pain medication, oxycodone, exhibited erratic and self-destructive behavior by suddenly severing all financial ties, evicting her only child and rewriting her will to benefit a random nursing scholarship instead of her family. They're leveraging the public perception of the side effects of strong narcotics and the stress of recovery. They're using the very things I paid for, their careers, their legal access, to lie. Precisely. And to the average judge, unfamiliar with your history or the details of your abuse, the narrative holds enough weight for them to grant the emergency hearing. It's scheduled for next Tuesday morning. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. This wasn't about the money anymore. This was about my dignity, my self-respect, and my legal right to govern my own life. If they won, they would gain control over my assets, my medical care, and effectively my freedom. What is our defense? I asked, pushing all emotion aside and slipping into my professional nurse-manager persona. I needed facts, not feelings. We have 3 pillars, Marcus stated, tapping the file. First, medical counter-evidence. We have the testimony of your physical therapist, Daniel Reed, regarding your perfect mental status and adherence to all cognitive instructions. More importantly, we have the complete refusal of Dr. Harrison, your surgeon, to release your private medical records to Cecilia, effectively blocking their access to any true medical justification. Dr. Harrison, a man who respects your 40-year career, has essentially served as our first line of defense. Good old Dr. Harrison, I murmured, feeling a surge of loyalty toward my former colleague. Second, the paper trail of sanity. We will present the documents you signed, the detailed new will, the establishment of the Lucas Thorne Educational Trust, and the Boston Memorial Nursing Scholarship Endowment. These are highly complex, structured, and altruistic financial decisions, not the chaotic acts of an impaired mind. They prove careful planning and deliberation. And the third pillar? Marcus leaned forward. Your appearance. I advise my clients in these situations to send a representative, but I am going to recommend you testify. You need to be seen. You need to be heard. You need to demonstrate, under direct and cross-examination, that your capacity is not merely intact, but sharper than it has been in years. Will they try to bait me? Make me cry? Absolutely. They will try to portray you as an emotional, vindictive, elderly woman. If you cry, if you lose your temper, we lose. You must remain calm, articulate, and focus only on the facts of their financial dependence and your calculated professional decision to reclaim your life. You must be the nurse, not the mother. I spent the next 5 days preparing for court as intensely as I had prepared for my surgery. Marcus drilled me on my testimony, forcing me to recount the incident on the floor. The exact dates the checks were written and the specific, chilling details of Julian's entitlement, How much did you pay for Cecilia's medical school, Eleanor? $180,000 plus interest. And the down payment on the house? $300,000. And the total amount of unexplained financial assistance over 15 years? Approximately $400,000, not including the previous two amounts. So, over $700,000 in gifts? Yes. And for that you received what exactly when you needed help? A closed door and a lecture on professional boundaries. By the time Tuesday morning arrived, I felt strangely serene. I was dressed impeccably in a tailored pale gray suit, a color I had chosen to convey professionalism and neutrality. My cane felt like an extension of my resolve. I was no longer going to court to fight my daughter. I was going to court to defend my identity. Remember, Eleanor, Marcus said, adjusting my lapel as we walked toward the courtroom doors. Speak to the judge. Not to them. Tell your truth. I nodded, took a deep breath, and prepared to enter the next phase of my liberation. This was the moment where my personal pain would become a matter of public record, a necessary sacrifice to secure my future. The cost was high, but the freedom was priceless. The courtroom was sterile, cold, and utterly intimidating. The mahogany paneling, the towering ceiling, and the stern figure of the Judge Thompson created an atmosphere designed to reduce all human conflict to cold procedural facts. I sat beside Marcus King, facing the opposing table where Cecilia and Julian sat with their lawyer, Evelyn Reed. Cecilia was dressed in a conservative navy suit, projecting the image of a concerned, dutiful daughter. The hearing began with Evelyn Reed's opening statement, a devastating summary of their claims, that my actions were erratic, financially destructive, and indicative of a temporary cognitive impairment fueled by surgical trauma and narcotic dependence. Cecilia testified first. She delivered a flawless performance of tearful distress, describing her deep concern for my sudden, volatile mood swings and my unfounded paranoia about their motives. We were trying our best to care for her. Your Honor, Cecilia sniffled, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. But she became impossible, calling us cold, accusing us of greed, and ultimately destroying her entire financial life out of spite. This is not the mother I know. Marcus King cross-examined her mercilessly, focusing on their income versus their debt and their failure to make the mortgage payments on the house I owned. Dr. Thorne, Marcus asked, his voice sharp, if your mother was so impaired, why did you not immediately seek legal action, instead waiting until your assets were frozen and your livelihood was threatened? We wanted to handle it within the family, Cecilia stammered. Or did you wait until the moment your easy access to her wealth was cut off, suggesting your primary concern was financial, not maternal? Next, Julian took the stand, trying to maintain his professional gravitas while recounting my unreasonable demands for round-the-clock care. Finally, it was my turn. I moved slowly but deliberately to the witness stand, focusing entirely on my breathing and the need for precision. Evelyn Reed began the attack instantly. Mrs. Vance, she purred, can you confirm that on the day you chose to leave your daughter's care, you were actively consuming a potent, highly addictive opioid, oxycodone, at the prescribed dosage of 10 milligrams every 6 hours? I can confirm that I was reducing the dosage on my own accord and was fully aware of the potential side effects, I replied calmly, looking directly at the judge. I am a career nurse with 40 years of pharmacological experience. And yet, despite your experience, you chose to evict your daughter and son-in-law, cancel all their credit card access, and sever financial support totaling over $700,000. Is this not, by any objective standard, an irrational, punitive, and emotionally driven action? It was a calculated, professional decision to end a debilitating, one-sided financial arrangement, Your Honor, I countered, my voice firm. I gave them 2 minutes to assist me to the commode. They refused, citing the demands of their 6-figure careers. That refusal proved unequivocally that I was not a mother to them, but an asset to be managed. Ending the financial flow was not an act of insanity. It was an act of self-preservation. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. Mrs. Vance, what evidence do you offer that you are operating at full capacity? Your Honor, I offer the complexity of my actions. Marcus King will now submit the new will, which includes the establishment of the Lucas Thorne Educational Trust and the Boston Memorial Nursing Scholarship Endowment. These actions required weeks of planning, coordination with a lawyer, and clear, rational decision-making that benefits my chosen legacy, not just myself. Marcus King then called Audrey Hayes to the stand. Audrey was brilliant, testifying not only about my current, stable state of mind, but also about the years of emotional manipulation she had witnessed. Did Mrs. Vance show any confusion during the signing of the legal documents? Marcus asked. None whatsoever, Audrey affirmed. She was deliberate, she asked appropriate questions, and she was more lucid than I have seen her in 10 years. She was finally free from the weight of her daughter's constant demands. The final nail in Cecilia's coffin was the submission of Dr. Harrison's letter, which confirmed my rapid physical and cognitive recovery and explicitly stated that he found no evidence of delirium, paranoia, or impaired capacity, and fully supported my legal decisions. After a tense, 30-minute recess, Judge Thompson returned. The court has reviewed the evidence submitted, he stated, his voice resonating through the chamber. The defense has presented compelling evidence of the petitioner's clear, rational, and long-term financial planning, which directly contradicts the claim of impaired capacity. The court finds no evidence of delusion or mental impairment. The actions taken by Mrs. Vance were deliberate, legally sound, and within her rights. He hammered his gavel down. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied. The existing revocation of the power of attorney remains in effect. Mrs. Vance retains full autonomy over her person and estate. I did not move. I did not cry. I only felt the profound physical release of pressure, the weight of decades of expectation finally collapsing. I had won my life back. 2 days after the judicial victory, I was officially discharged from Golden Pines. The staff, many of whom had followed the court drama with professional discretion and private solidarity, gave me a small, heartfelt send-off. Isabel Diaz personally handed me a bouquet of 6 white roses. Go home, Eleanor, she advised warmly, and don't look back. Audrey drove me home, not to her cozy apartment, but to my own elegant pre-war residence in Back Bay, which had stood empty for the past 6 weeks. Marcus King had arranged for a cleaning service and a security team to ensure the apartment was pristine and secure. Stepping across my own threshold felt like crossing a finish line. The familiar scent of old leather and polished wood enveloped me, a soothing contrast to the cold sterility of the hospital and the tense energy of the courtroom. I settled onto my favorite antique chaise lounge, letting the weight of the past few weeks finally settle. It's good to be home, Audrey, I murmured, feeling a surge of peace. It is, she agreed, and you have a guest. Lucas had arrived from California the previous evening, having finished his finals. He emerged from the kitchen, looking exhausted but relieved. He embraced me gently, mindful of my knee, which now only ached faintly. Grandma, I'm so glad you won, he whispered. Mom and Dad told me you lost, and that the lawyers were lying. I was so worried. The realization that they were still trying to manipulate even their own son about the court's public ruling sickened me. But it no longer held power over me. They lost. Sweetheart, I confirmed, holding him tightly. And I am fine, I am home. Now tell me, what are you doing here? I thought you had a research position lined up for August? I do, he admitted, his posture tense. But Mom and Dad are getting divorced. The news stunned me. Despite their many flaws, Cecilia and Julian had always seemed like a united front, particularly when it came to maintaining their affluent lifestyle. I'm so sorry, Lucas, I said sincerely. When did this happen? Dad moved out about 3 weeks ago, right after the initial accounts were frozen. They've been fighting constantly since then. Dad says Mom's spending habits destroyed their credit and put them deep in debt. Mom says Dad never would have married her if he hadn't thought he was getting your money eventually. The ugliness of their accusations toward each other pained me, especially knowing that Lucas was caught in the crossfire. And how are you handling all this? I asked gently. Not great, he admitted. That's partly why I came here. I needed to get away from both of them for a while. Mom knows I'm here and she wants to come talk to you. I tensed involuntarily. Did she put you up to this? Ask you to soften me up first? No. Lucas looked genuinely offended. I mean, she knows I was coming, but this was my idea. I'm tired of being stuck in the middle. I thought maybe if you two could actually talk without lawyers or hospitals involved, maybe... His hope was so earnest, so youthful in its optimism, that I couldn't bring myself to dismiss it outright. When does she want to come? I asked, mentally preparing myself for the final, perhaps most difficult confrontation. Tomorrow afternoon. She has the day off? All right. Tell her she can come at 2 o'clock. But Lucas, I fixed him with a serious look, I need you to understand that this conversation may not go the way you're hoping. Some rifts can't be bridged in a single meeting. I know, he said quietly. I just want you both to try. That evening, I called Marcus King to inform him of the impending meeting. Are you sure you're ready for this, Eleanor? He asked, concern evident in his voice. As ready as I'll ever be, Marcus, I replied. This needs to happen between Cecilia and me. Having others there would only complicate the emotional truth. Call me immediately after, he instructed. And remember, you don't have to agree to anything on the spot. You can always say you need time to consider. The next morning, I woke early, my internal clock still set to hospital shifts. Lucas was already in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, a plate of slightly overcooked, but wonderfully thoughtful. Eggs. I thought you might like some protein after all that hospital food, he explained sheepishly. It looks wonderful, I assured him, touched by the gesture. Grandma, he began carefully, about today's meeting with Mom. I want you to make yourself scarce while she's here. Go to a movie. Visit the public garden. Anything. This conversation needs to happen without an audience. Lucas frowned slightly. But what if... No what ifs, I said firmly. This isn't your burden to carry, sweetheart. It's between your mother and me. Though clearly disappointed, he nodded in agreement. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Lucas had left an hour earlier, promising to return around dinner time. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. Cecilia stood in the hallway. She had lost weight, her expensive tailored suit hanging slightly loose on her frame, and there was a new hardness around her mouth, yet also a subtle, unfamiliar fragility. Mom, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Cecilia, I replied, stepping back to allow her entry. Please come in. She entered cautiously, her eyes scanning the apartment. I led her to the living room where I'd arranged 2 chairs facing each other, close enough for conversation, but with enough distance to maintain my personal space. Would you like some tea? I offered, falling back on the social niceties that had structured our interactions for years. No, she said shortly. I think we've had enough pretense, don't you? I settled into my chair, meeting her gaze directly. Why are you here, Cecilia? Lucas thinks we need to talk, she said, her tone suggesting she found the idea dubious at best. And what do you think? She sighed, some of her defensive posture deflating. I think our relationship is beyond repair, but I also think we need closure. You won, Mom. Julian is filing for bankruptcy. He's moved out. The bank took the house. You have everything you wanted? Closure? I repeated. That sounds very final. Isn't that what you wanted? She challenged. When you froze the accounts, evicted us from our home, and rewrote your will? What I wanted, I replied evenly, was respect, consideration, basic human kindness from my daughter during a vulnerable time. It wasn't about the money, Cecilia. She flinched slightly but recovered quickly. One bad day, Mom? We had one bad day after years of taking care of you, and you punished us like we were criminals. Taking care of me? I echoed incredulously. Cecilia, I've been financially supporting you and Julian for years. I paid for your education, your wedding, your house. And you never let us forget it. She interrupted, color rising in her cheeks. Every gift came with invisible strings. Every generous gesture was another way to remind me that I couldn't succeed on my own. Her accusation struck me like a physical blow. Is that really how you perceived my help? As some sort of power play? What else was I supposed to think? She demanded, her voice rising in pitch. The great Nurse Vance, beloved by all, swooping in to rescue her struggling daughter at every turn. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in your shadow? Hearing about how respected and admired you were while I was just an afterthought. An afterthought, Cecilia? My voice cracked slightly. Everything I did was for you. Every extra shift, every promotion I worked for, it was all to give you opportunities I never had. Opportunities to become you, she countered bitterly. But I could never be you, could I? Never quite good enough. Never quite successful enough on my own terms. You were trying to love me by buying my life. As she spoke, I began to see glimpses of a narrative I'd never considered. How my pride in her accomplishments might have been perceived as expectations she could never meet. How my financial support, intended as love, might have felt like an ongoing statement of her inadequacy. I never meant to make you feel that way, I said quietly, genuinely shaken. I was trying to help, to show my love the only way I knew how. By buying it, she stated flatly. And then, when we couldn't repay that love in exactly the way you wanted, the 2 minutes in the bathroom, you took it all away. You revoked the gifts. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misunderstanding hanging between us. Well, I see you now, Cecilia finally said, a muscle working in her jaw. I see exactly who you are and what matters to you. And what is that? I asked softly. Control, she said simply. You couldn't control me anymore with guilt and generosity, so you found another way. You won. Congratulations, Mom. As she stood to leave, I realized with profound sadness that we were speaking entirely different languages. What I saw as self-respect, she perceived as punishment. What I felt as betrayal, she experienced as liberation from oppressive expectations. This isn't about winning, Cecilia, I said as she reached the door. There are no winners here. There is only reality. She paused, her back to me. Tell Lucas I'll call him tomorrow. She left. There had been no reconciliation, no tearful embraces. Instead, there had been truth, painful, unvarnished truth from both sides. And yet, despite the ache in my heart, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time, we had spoken honestly to each other without the veneer of politeness that had masked our true feelings for so long. It wasn't closure. It wasn't healing. But it was real. And reality, however painful, was preferable to the comforting illusions I'd lived with for decades. When Lucas returned that evening, his hopeful expression quickly faded as he took in my solemn demeanor. It didn't go well, did it? He asked, settling beside me on the sofa. It went honestly, I replied carefully. Sometimes honesty doesn't feel good in the moment. He nodded, seeming older than his 19 years. Mom texted me. She just said, some rifts can't be repaired. Is that true? Some rifts can't be repaired in the ways we initially hope, I said finally. But that doesn't mean healing is impossible. It just might look different than we expected. Different how? Perhaps instead of trying to recreate what was lost, we build something new, with clearer boundaries and more honesty. He was quiet for a moment. Mom's really hurting, you know. Even before everything happened with you, she was always trying to prove something to herself, to Dad, to everyone at the hospital. His insight surprised me. When did you become so perceptive? He shrugged, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. I watch people. Maybe that's why I'm studying psychology instead of medicine like Mom wanted. 3 weeks after the meeting with Cecilia, I submitted my application for a part-time position in Boston Memorial's Patient Advocacy Department. I was seeking to return to my vocation not for money, but for purpose. The interview went better than I'd anticipated. The department director, a woman about 15 years my junior, had actually been one of my nursing students decades earlier. She offered me the job instantly, 3 shifts per week helping patients navigate the increasingly complex healthcare system, using my vast experience and knowledge to ensure their voices were heard. It felt profoundly right. The morning of the following Monday, my start date, I stood before my closet. I chose a professional, confident teal blouse that Lucas had once told me brought out the color in my eyes. paired with simple black slacks. "You've got this, Grandma," Lucas assured me, giving me a quick hug before shuffling toward the kitchen. "Just be yourself, be myself." Such simple advice, yet so profound. For most of my life, I'd defined myself through my relationships and responsibilities: nurse, wife, mother, provider. Now, I was learning to define myself on my own terms. As I walked toward the parking garage, a familiar figure emerged from the hospital's main entrance: Cecilia, in her white lab coat, deep in conversation with a colleague. She hadn't seen me yet, and for a moment the old impulse to hide returned. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and continued walking directly toward her. When she finally looked up and noticed me, her expression flickered through surprise, weariness, and a grudging acknowledgement. "Mom?" She excused herself from her colleague and approached me cautiously. "What are you doing here?" "I had an interview," I replied simply. "Patient advocacy. I start this morning. 3 days a week. It's a big hospital, Cecilia." "I don't expect we'll cross paths often." She blinked, clearly taken aback. I didn't think you'd actually do it. Or that they'd hire me," I finished for her. She adjusted her stethoscope, a nervous habit I recognized from her medical school days. "Well, congratulations." An awkward silence fell between us. "How are you?" I finally asked, the question inadequate but sincere. "Managing," she replied shortly. Then, with visible effort, she added, "The divorce will be final next month. Julian's already moved to Chicago." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Whatever their flaws as a couple, divorce was painful, especially after 15 years. "Are you?" she asked, a hint of the old bitterness creeping in. "I would think you'd be glad to see us fall apart." "No," I said firmly. "I never wanted that, Cecilia. Despite everything, I only ever wanted you to be happy." She studied me for a long moment, as though trying to determine my sincerity. "You seem happy, Mom." "I am," I admitted. She hesitated, then added, Maybe we could have coffee sometime this week to discuss how we'll handle working in the same facility." A professional courtesy. It wasn't an olive branch exactly, more like a pragmatic acknowledgement of our new, separate realities. But it was something. "I'd like that," I replied. As she turned to go, I called after her. "Cecilia, I meant what I said before. I do want you to be happy." She paused, not turning back fully. "I know, Mom. In your way, you always did. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It wasn't even particularly warm. But it was honest. And after decades of politeness masking deeper resentments, honesty felt like a foundation we might eventually build upon." That evening, as Lucas and I celebrated my new position with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, I found myself filled with an unexpected sense of optimism. "You seem different." "Grandma," Lucas observed, studying me over his pad thai. "Lighter, somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based solely on what I want and need, not on what I think others expect of me." "And how does that feel?" he asked. "It feels like rebirth," I replied. "Like I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be." At 68, I realized that the painful journey of the past months had led me not to an ending, but to a beginning. The relationship I'd tried so desperately to preserve might never be fully restored. But in its place, something new was emerging, a life defined by authenticity rather than accommodation, by self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. It wasn't the future I had once imagined, but as I looked at my grandson across the table and thought about my new role at the hospital, I knew with absolute certainty it was the future I deserved, tu yet voi. Doi jai la bandishtingan kua fan ketuk moi. Daptrung vao via keo goi jung ki ken. I did it. I fought for and reclaimed sovereignty over my own life. My story, Eleanor Vance's story, is a reminder that it is never too late to rewrite your final chapter, to find truth and liberation. If my tears, my betrayal, and my ultimate victory have resonated with you, if you are looking for inspiration to defend yourself and set your boundaries, then join my community. Hit that subscribe button right now, Ring the notification bell so you don't miss any story of resilience and rebirth. Let me know in the comments which moment of this journey inspired you the most. Don't let your story end in silent sacrifice. Write your own victory. Hit subscribe and move forward with me.